Hello, I'm Joshua Sparrow at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center. And this is Learning to Listen, Conversations for Change. To find out more about the Brazelton Touchpoint Center and Learning to Listen, just go to brazeltontouchpoints.org and click on the Offerings tab or the Webinars tab. Today, we have the incredible good fortune to be listening to and learning with Geoffrey Canada, founder of the Harlem Children's Zone. And we'll find out what he is learning from children, families, and communities, and about the challenges they face today. If you don't know already, you'll soon also find out why Jeff has been such an inspiration for so many of us here at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center and so many more across the United States and around the world. But before we begin, a bit of information about today's Learning to Listen episode. Over 1,500 people registered for today's webinar. It's wonderful to see you all in the chat. So tell us who you are and where you're from and what you do in the chat. Today, our wonderful interpreter, Maria Jose Gutierrez, is back again with us from Bogota, Colombia, and she will be simultaneously translating today's webinar in Spanish. Thank you again, Maria Jose. To access the translation, click on the interpretation icon in your Zoom controls. Then select Spanish. To mute the English in the background, select Mute Original Audio. La conversación de hoy será en español e inglés. En los controles de esta reunión, haga clic en Interpretación. Haga clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar. Para escuchar solo el español, haga clic en Silenciar Audio Original. We are also providing closed captions today for those who would like to use them. To turn captioning on, please click on the closed caption icon in your Zoom controls and select Show Subtitle. You can adjust the size for the subtitles. And people always ask about this. So if you would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please do be sure you complete the feedback survey. That survey will open in your web browser when today's webinar ends, and you will also receive a link to this survey tomorrow in our thank you email to you. There'll be a link to the webinar recording as well as the survey in that email, and they will both be available in English as well as Spanish. For the recordings, you can also find them on our YouTube channel and at brazeltontouchpoints.org. Before we begin, I want to thank our sponsor, the Burke Foundation, and our Brazelton Touchpoint Center production team, Isabella Mantilla, Nelson Octavia, Shella Merchant-Juma, Michael Accardi, and Suzanne Okasik. And now I'd like to introduce today's guest, Jeffrey Canada. We are so grateful that Jeff accepted our invitation. He is in such high demand, so in order to accommodate his intensely packed schedule this fall, we recorded this conversation with him on September 20th, 2022, which was just 1 week before today's airing of this Learning to Listen conversation. So he and I sat down last week. And because we won't all be able to ask Jeff our questions today, I'd invited Dr. Ernestine Brown, our Director of Relational Equity and Belonging, to join me then to bring our questions to Jeff. Jeff has been an inspiration for much of what we do at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center and a mentor, teacher, and friend ever since Barry Brazelton and I first began working with him at the Harlem Children's Zone back in 1999. Jeff created the Harlem Children's Zone, a birth through college network of programs that today serves more than 13,000 students and families with low incomes in a 97-block area of central Harlem in New York City. The unprecedented success of the Harlem Children's Zone has attracted the attention of the media and leaders around the world. In 2011, Jeff was named one of the world's most influential people by Time magazine and as one of the 50 greatest leaders by Fortune magazine in 2014. President Barack Obama created the Promise Neighborhoods Initiative to replicate the Harlem Children's Zone model across the United States. Jeff has been profiled extensively in the media, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, the Oprah Winfrey Show, and Forbes, among many others. He was featured in the documentary Waiting for Superman, be sure you see it if you haven't, which was about the dire state of American education. And Jeff has received more than 25 honorary degrees, including ones from Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, and the University of Pennsylvania. Jeff has also influenced a new generation of education reformers through his writings, and that has been through his published essays in the New York Times, New York Daily News, and the Chronicle of Philanthropy, among others, as well as in his two critically acclaimed books on poverty and violence, Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun, which is a largely autobiographical memoir, and Reaching Up for Manhood. And both of them, I'll just say, have had a profound impact on my own thinking and work. After 30 years with the Harlem Children's Zone, Jeff stepped down in 2014 as Chief Executive Officer, but continues on to serve as president. And in June 2020, Canada founded the William Julius Wilson Institute, which will serve as the national platform to help communities impacted by poverty across the country design and implement their own place-based programs. And its first initiative will be to combat the devastation of COVID-19 in the Black community. We'll hear more about that shortly. So Jeff, thank you so much for agreeing to be with us. Again, it is so good to see you. We're just delighted to have you with us. So over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Josh. And sorry you had to read that whole long biography for everybody. And I just have to start off by saying that we started the Harlem Children's Zone thinking about when was the most crucial time to sort of get a child a really fair start in life And because of Josh's work with Barry Brazelton and Touchpoints Center, we created our baby college. They helped us create baby college. Josh, you should know that we have graduated over 9,000 of our parents from baby college over the years. And every year, I'm going to graduation at Promise Academy. And there are parents who are coming up to me and saying, Jeff, don't you remember her? She was with you at baby college. And Josh, as Barry would be proud, I say, of course I remember her. Of course I don't remember her. I mean, she was 6 months old when we first met her. But what we were trying to do was to answer a question that I sort of had wrestled with even as a young child. You mentioned Waiting for Superman. After that documentary was finished, it didn't have a title. 4 months, 5 months, I would call the producer, hey, did we think about what the title? No, we're thinking about it. And one day they called and they said, Jeff, we have a title. Oh, that's great. What's the title? And they said, it's going to be called Waiting for Superman. And I was stunned and flattered because the title was taken from something I had said on camera, which was true, about being a little boy growing up in the South Bronx in a community that was literally falling down around us. There was fear and danger and filth and infestation by rodents. And as a kid, I just knew that we weren't going to get out of that place without real help. And when my mother told me there was no Superman, and I started crying. She thought I was crying because like there's no Easter Bunny and it's, but I was crying because I knew that we weren't going to make it out of this place. I knew that at a 7 or 8 year old. And folks say, well, Jeff, you got out. I did get out. But my mother had 4 boys. Only 3 of us got out. My wife, Yvonne, had 3 brothers and sisters. She's from Harlem, which was very much like the South Bronx. None of her brothers and sisters made it to 40. When I was a kid, I kept saying to myself, there's got to be an answer. Somewhere, this is not fair, that some children grow up with a wonderful world. Now I'm going to date a bunch of your viewers aren't going to understand this. We grew up reading, our first reader was Dick and Jane. It was about 2 white kids growing up in a nice house with a green lawn and a little dog, and everything was wonderful. And the sun was always shining, and they had proper clothes, and that was not our life. I knew that life existed for some children. I was like, I'm sure that there's somewhere in this country, people are growing up like that, but not in my neighborhood. And I spent the next 15 years of my life trying to figure out what were the answers. How could you provide young people with the kinds of supports that would give them an opportunity, first of all, just to live, because so many young folks were having their lives cut short, ended up in jails and prisons, teenage parents, because they literally had not the kind of guidance and support that other places received in this country. And if you look at my time at Bowdoin, Josh, everything I did was trying to answer this one question. What could we do that could change those outcomes? And at that time, I was concerned with Black and brown children growing up in the inner cities. Over the years, I'm concerned about all poor children. I'm concerned about rural children who are white in Appalachia or in the Deep South who are growing up with similar kinds of obstacles, maybe not having to deal with racism, but all the other obstacles that poverty brings. So in thinking about what we could do, I started trying to find the science and follow the science. And luckily, my introduction to touch points was part of following that science. We have adopted that curriculum and still use it at Baby College even today. It has changed the lives of many of our families who believe that they have a great start. And I have to tell you, whenever I have a parent in one of my schools who's really giving me a hard time, I'm demanding that you do this. I say to him, you probably went to Baby College. And you say, yeah, I did, because we were teaching our parents that they are their children's first teacher. And that's a lifelong prospect. So part of what I've been trying to figure out is why. I mean, what's the why behind the fact that we've had advances in dealing with challenges and diseases, polio and tuberculosis. We've sent folks to the moon and got this beautiful sort of new rockets out there looking at the universe, and yet in that same South Bronx where I grew up, children are facing the same kind of challenges that I faced when I was 7 and 8 and 9. And we as a society have just not taken this issue about supporting our children seriously. And at the Harlem Children's Zone, we wanted to prove one thing, which was if you could create a total environment, and we're not, people thought maybe we're a charter school. No, we are not. When we first met you all back in 1990, we were going block by block. We were cleaning up the neighborhoods, fixing the playgrounds, getting the parks to work, getting the rats out of the empty lots. So our children would grow up in a place where it looked like the adults cared about them and they were important. And we believed if you could rebuild this sense of community and at the same time provide great evidence-based support for children from birth through college, then our children would have a chance. They would have a chance at what I think of as the American dream, Josh, where people like you and I and Dr. Brown, we work hard, we do the right thing, and you can have, a real chance at, living a meaningful life in this country. And there are just millions of our children across America that's not the case for. So I just want to say a word about the Harlem Children's Zone and then why I came back out of retirement to create the William Jewis Wilson Institute. There's nothing magical about what we're doing. There's no, people go, oh, that Jeff is so brilliant. No, I'm not. I tell folks, the Harlem Children's Zone wasn't even my idea. We were part of something from, at that time, my leader, Marion Wright Edelman, created the Black Community Crusade for Children because Black children, she says, was her statement, were facing the worst crisis since slavery. And she was bringing together all of the people who care about children at every level, child welfare, education, juvenile justice. She was bringing these Black professionals together for us to build a plan. And we were meeting down at the former Alex Haley farm in Tennessee. And year went by, 2 years went by. And the third year, a bunch of us were sitting around the table, and Otis Johnson, who's from Savannah, and he later became the mayor of Savannah, but he was doing the Annie Casey Youth Futures program in Savannah. At one point, he's also a professor. He just got mad and said, if we want to solve this problem, we keep looking for a silver bullet. He said, there is no silver bullet. You're going to have to, and he started writing. You have to start with making sure children are born healthy. You're going to have to make sure they have great early childhood. You're going to make sure their community and their environment are going. And he just kept writing on that blackboard, and I kept taking notes. And when he finished, I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And we had the blessing that Stan Druckenmiller, who was my partner in this work. He's a businessman. He backed this effort. He said, but government wasn't paying for it. There was no promised neighborhood. We raised private dollars to go in and work in a 97 block in central Harlem, essentially with 10,000 children. The fact that we could do it, people kept saying, oh, you know, only Jeff could do it, which was not true. You need Stan Druckenmiller or it won't work, which was not true. People kept coming up with excuses to why they would not replicate this effort. And Josh, just to be totally honest, all I want for my poor children in Harlem is what middle-class children take for granted. I don't want anything more than that. I want them to have decent schools. I want them to have great health care. I want them to live in clean neighborhoods, safe and orderly. I want to reduce their stress and make sure they have social services when they need it. I mean, we know what to do for children. People kept telling me, yeah, Jeff, but we can't afford that. I was like, we can't afford. No, we can't afford that. What you're trying to do, I figure out what's the one thing that is the most important thing and the most important time in a child's life. And you know, that's where I went to early childhood and I started out. I said, oh, we got to get them early. Over the years, and I think every parent who is watching this is going to be where I am. The most important time in a child's life is today. It is today. And if that child is 15, it's today. And if that child is 6, it's today. I don't know anybody, a parent that says, okay, I did good 14 years. I'm good. I don't have to worry about this kid anymore. Everything's going to be fine. It's just not true. It is one of the most complicated things you can do to raise a child. If you have money and you have an education, it is still hard and complicated to do. Folks who have none of that, to think that we can work with the kid for 8 years and then that kid's going to be fine. When the schools aren't doing their job, the social services aren't, the housing is lousy, the parks and playgrounds are violent. That's simply, there's no evidence that that is going to work. So we wanted to create this sort of support for children. And we tell folks it costs about $5,000 a year on top of education, which is really not true. It costs about $3,000 because we also serve parents. You can't save kids and ignore families. That's just not possible. But I wanted the higher price. I wanted the higher price because people would say, we as a society can't afford that. You know how many kids it is, Jeff? We can. And my pushback has always been that we pay for the work we did not do when these kids get 17, 18, and 19. And you begin to look at the number of kids end up in institutions who foster care, juvenile detention, who end up incarcerated. And that 10 years ago, when I would talk about these numbers, George, I would say, okay, you're talking about my $5,000 a year for a kid, right? So you average that out for 20 years. So you'll end up with $100,000 you've invested. At that time, 10 years ago, the cost of sending a kid to Rikers Island City Jail was $140,000 a year. And your folks, I always tell folks, they're not going to believe this, right? But everybody has their phones. So while you're listening to me, you can just Google this. You know what that number is in New York City right now? Try around $450,000 a year. Rikers Island is still full to overflow. We are totally comfortable paying huge amounts of money for these same kids when the end result, now, I don't know anyone who went to Rikers Island and came back a better citizen. Oh yeah, I went to Rikers Island, now I can get a job. I'm a better parent to my child. For that investment, we get nothing. For the kind of investments I'm talking about, you know, I have to eliminate the white-black achievement gap, which, by the way, we have done for this kind of an investment. So to me, this is really not a matter of cost. This is a matter of who do we value? in this country. And there are certain children in America that we do not value. And in these urban areas and in the rural areas where kids are in deep poverty, folks think that it's too expensive to create the kind of supports that help them, even though no one says what we do don't work. They don't say, okay, no, Jeff, you invested all of that. It actually hasn't worked. We've got about 900 of our kids in college right now. We've graduated over 1,000 kids with college degrees. So there's no one saying it doesn't work. They're just saying, as a nation, can we afford to do? So this was all before COVID. Oh my goodness. So I'm home. I'm retired. I was retired for 7 years. And Josh, I will tell you, people told me I was going to hate it. I did not hate it. I was happily retired. I had been on call for 30 years, 7 days a week. Just always, because things always happen. Now I'm retired. If I got a phone call at 9 o'clock, it was my grandson who needed $50. I was so happy to give that kid $50. You have no idea. It was like life was good. So you say, well, why did you come back? I was actually on a site visit with Blue Meridian Partners, and they were thinking about investing in communities. And we were in Compton, California. It was right after Nipsey Hussle had been killed, the famous rapper. He had, literally days after that, we're going right in that same community. And we've got all of these sort of billionaires, not me, but other folks who are visiting, and we're going into places. Everywhere we go, there's just this massive group of police to protect us, right? Because they realize how dangerous this place was. And we're in a housing complex. And I'm looking around, and I'm seeing just every window covered up because people are scared. It looked like an institution where folks were building like jails to keep people from breaking in versus bars to keep people from breaking out. And I just thought, how are these kids going to make it? So we go to a community center, and there's some folks there, and they're talking about the violence, and they're talking about the lack of opportunity, and they're talking about the isolation. And I said to myself, I actually know how to help these people. I actually have something that I can offer a community that are serious about trying to deal with these kind of challenges. Places, the kind of places I want to help are places that if you go into those cities, they tell you don't go there, especially after dark. You don't want to go in that neighborhood. When I go in those places and I see the bars on the windows and the doors, I'm like, yeah, okay. These are the children that I want to make sure have a real shot in this country. So I came out of retirement to create the William Julius Wilson Institute. And for folks who don't know Bill Wilson, you should look him up. He's one of the preeminent Black intellectuals in this country. I found out about his work when he was still at the University of Chicago before he went to Harvard. And he had written a couple of books. One book was The Truly Disadvantaged. And he was making the case, and he got some pushback for this, but I lived this experience. He was making the case that in the urban centers, once African Americans were allowed to move out of their neighborhoods because you had a breakdown in some of the segregation, as those neighborhoods became dangerous and folks didn't feel like their kids had a chance, they moved out. The upper middle class moved out, then the middle class moved out, then the working class moved out. And he said the folks who were left did not have the kind of relationships that would help them navigate through the education and other employment systems and become healthy and productive folks. Instead, they were often exhibiting the kinds of challenges that you find in lots of inner cities. And people accuse them of blaming the victim, and they said some other stuff. But I will tell you again, there's some recent research done by Raj Chetty, the economist at Harvard, where he looked at how important it is if you're poor and you have relationships with folks who are more economically advantaged than you are. That in and of itself produces huge gains in employment. So what he was saying with Bill Wilson was right. Where you have communities that people have relationships with different classes, it is easier for the poor folks to have more social mobility. That book combined with his other book, When Work Disappears. And he talked about what happens to our communities when folks, there were these mass migrations of African Americans from the South coming north for jobs and employment. And there were jobs available, the war was going on, there had a lack of men, a lot of the men came up and worked, war ended, a lot of these jobs ended, and then jobs started moving from the eastern cities to the South. When work disappears, he argued lots of the social ills happen in communities. That what we are treating is the end result of people not being able to take care of themselves and their family. So Bill Wilson changed my way of thinking about poverty. I was like, I want all my kids to have great jobs and be able to provide for themselves and their families. And the only way I know to do that is to give them a quality education to ensure that they get it. So came out of retirement, created the William Judith Wilson Institute. We're working with about 20 different cities around the country who are interested in building these cradle to career supports for children. And I think the message that we're bringing is there are answers, they are complicated, not easy. You need really smart, dedicated folks to pull this off, but you can go into these communities and rebuild the kind of infrastructure so children can be successful. I want to say a word about all of this happened before COVID. I come out of retirement, COVID hits, and I've been in this education business 47 years. So longer than most of the folks watching this have been alive, right? So, and I've been through different crises in America. And the desegregation of the Boston schools in the 70s, it was just really hard. I was working at that time, the crack epidemic and what happened to kids and families, handgun violence led to me writing Fist Stick Knife Gun. I've been through all of that. All of it pales in comparison to what our children have just gone through because of COVID. I mean, I knew it was bad, but when I had one of my kids say, I went home when I was in the 6th grade, and I came back to school when I was in the 8th grade. And I just thought, we provided online instruction for our kids, and we did, but I'm just thinking, what would that be for you to miss? If you think about the difference in social maturity and experience between the 6th grade and the 8th grade, it's just, there's no comparison. These kids have missed all of that, much less the academic supports. But one of the critical challenges is we've traumatized a nation of children. Real trauma, toxic stress. Can you imagine where your breath might kill your grandparents? That standing next to somebody, they could be killing you and you not know anything about that. That's hard for us adults to deal with, right? It just is. We're all traumatized. I'm traumatized. I always tell folks, if it's the middle of the night and my wife starts coughing, right? And first thing I'm like, are you okay? You okay, right? Because that was one of those signs, and but I'm just thinking, what if you're 9? And this has been your experience of growing up in this country, the mask, the fear, the anxiety, and the learning loss. The way I described this was, we as a society, those of us like yourself, like Dr. Brown, who have dedicated our lives to helping the most disadvantaged communities in this country. We've been working on this, and it was hard. We are now further back than when we started. Things are going to be harder now than they were 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, they were really, really tough. And what I worry about is that some folks, I've seen this in our profession. Some folks are just like, I'm done. don't do this anymore. I can make more money doing something else. I don't need the aggravation. I don't need the stress. I don't need the fear. And they're leaving. And it's hard for us to find teachers. If I know in the medical profession, the social services, folks are just giving up. So that's one response. There's another response I've seen where folks have said, this is the new normal, accept it, right? Yeah, they're behind, they're traumatized. Yeah, well, that is what it is. And you got to work with what you've got. And they've accepted this, and they know that these children are not going to be able to compete. And they've just accepted that's going to be the deal. And I think there's a smaller group of us that have decided our kids are even further behind, which means we're going to have to work harder and smarter and be more scientific if we are going to ensure that these young people really have a chance. And I am just imploring folks. I know everybody's tired. I know everybody's frustrated. I know we all want life to get back together and for things to be, in quotes, normal again. Things will not be normal for this generation of children unless we do something extraordinary over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. And it's a sacrifice. And, this country has sacrificed before. We've sacrificed during war times. We've sacrificed during hurricanes. And we're going to have to sacrifice right now if we're going to rebuild the kind of opportunities in this country that our children need. And that's the focus of the work we're doing at the William Julius Wilson Institute. We're trying to help folks. We're also trying to say to folks, come on, we can do it. Don't give up and don't accept the status quo, right? We have to reject that, even though that means we've got to do more. The good thing is we've got a lot more tools now than we had 20 years ago when we were starting this work. We've got a lot more examples of what can work for children and families. But you see it all over. You can't find enough social workers. You can't find enough counselors. Folks are having a hard time providing the kind of mental health supports for everybody, not just for children, but for the kids I'm worried about. And so we've got to rethink this. We've got to get smart about this, and we've got to come up with some answers. I will tell you, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not. I've traveled this country, and I have just seen extraordinary examples of communities coming together and saying, I got it. We got to tackle this problem, and we can, and we're going to do what's necessary to get this work done. The Harlem Children's Zone is no longer an exception. We've had a couple of hundred places come to visit us around the country. There are places all over America that's doing these cradle to career supports for children. And I think this movement is still growing. And I just want to say at the heart of this cradle to career work for us has always been Baby College. It's always been the work, Josh, that you and Barry helped us start in Harlem. And we commit ourselves. When we say to those parents, and we still say it even till this day, you start with us at Baby College, we're going to be with you when you're sending that kid to college, and we're going to help your child get through college. And every year at those graduations, those parents remind me, you told me that, and you kept your word, and we've got to keep our word to the next generation. So with that, I'm going to stop and maybe take some questions. And I know, Josh, you and Dr. Brown may have some questions for me, which I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I'd like to introduce again my colleague at the Brazelton Touchpoint Center, Dr. Ernestine Brown, who is a developmental psychologist and a doula. And she is our Director of Relational Equity and Belonging. And I'd just like to start by thanking you for circling back to Baby College. And you are bringing back memories of graduation at the final 9th session of Baby College. It's 9 Saturday mornings. And Barry Brazelton and I were there to hand out the diplomas to the parents who graduated. And, the look in some of these parents' faces of the commitment they'd made for their children and their own sense of accomplishment was so beautiful and so powerful. And so one of the questions that I had for you is about what you've learned about how to bring together communities. Going back to what you said earlier about how it wasn't even your idea, but when you saw you couldn't pull out a silver bullet, you've got to sort of pull it all together. How have you gone about bringing together communities? And I think about that particularly in the context of COVID, where everybody was isolated and couldn't connect with each other. And so this will not be the whole solution, but I think part of the extraordinary will be having communities reconnect so that they can hold children in safe social places where they can do the catch up on what they missed out on. So maybe you could talk more about how you did that at Harlem Children's and what you're seeing around the country.
Well, we had a really, I think, basic strategy that we would knock on doors. We were going to knock on people's doors because we believed that people, cared about children, whether they had them or not, and they cared about their neighborhood. And if you're not going to go and say, hey, you know what, we'd like to clean this block up, get rid of the trash, get rid of the graffiti, we want to make it safe for kids. No one said no, we don't want to do that. I want a dirty neighborhood, right? I don't want. So part of this was, we believe, and in lots of places, people go in communities like this and they say, oh, look at how those people live, right? And they're blaming folks and as if, yeah, you all accept this and you all cause this and you all create this. We believe the opposite. We believed everybody wanted a better opportunity for themselves and their children, and they just didn't know how to go about it. And so when we said, hey, and by the way, will you come to a meeting for us to talk about this? And what they wanted to know was, what's in it for you? What's your hustle? What's your, and it took a while for them to be like, no, all we want is for your building to be a safer place for you and your children. Your block to be a safer place and look like a beautiful place. That's what we want. And when they said, well, what's in it for you? We said, because this is the Harlem Children's Zone and you're in our zone. And that's what the zone is going to be. And people were skeptical. And it took them a little while. And I tell folks, they have a right to be skeptical. They have been hustled, bamboozled, promised stuff, never delivered, carpetbagged, right? I mean, you just name it in these communities, that there are all kinds of folks saying, we're coming in to help you. And then they help themselves and then they leave. So I told my team, don't be upset when they're mad at us. Don't be upset when they don't believe us. In the end, the evidence of your work will convince them that this was not a hustle. When they see you working right alongside them, painting those benches, cleaning up that park, repairing those broken fences, then folks began to say, you know what, maybe these folks are serious. And to me, Josh, to me, the key is you have to plan and do at the same time. These communities, they don't want you sitting around the table for 8 weeks talking about how we're going to make things better. What are we going to do this weekend? Let's tackle that problem this weekend, and then next week we can have another meeting. But this week we're going to clean up that park, and we're going to make it a better place. And what we have said to folks is, it is the action that folks, great, you have great plans. We believe in plans. We want folks to have plans. But in the community, folks don't care anything about the plan. They care about how serious you are about the action and what that means for them. So we have encouraged folks around the country to plan and do at the same time. There's a tendency when you're doing these plans, you'll meet month after month in community meetings. And after a while, folks are like, yeah, well, what's all of this mean? So that to me was the first thing. The second thing I think is that folks need to be able to be part of the design. When we wanted to create Baby College, I think you remember we were trying to figure out how to get folks to come, and we were meeting with our community and talking about ways of getting folks to come. And the community bought into it. They considered this their program. It wasn't a program we started and then invited them in. At the very beginning, we were like, we want you to meet Barry Brazelton. We want you all to understand what we're doing. We want your help. We started it first using churches and other local community groups for folks to realize that we were all in this together. So I think that's part of it, Josh. You got to go out. You got to be willing to knock on those doors, to have those conversations, but to demonstrate to people that you're not above them. So I was out there at the same time they were out there, making sure the work was being done, helping folks so that they felt like this was not us going in and saying, why don't you do all the heavy lifting while we do all the thinking? This was, let's both think together, but let's both work together at the same time.
Remembering all of the different ways in which everything that you did was putting the community in the center as the expert on their children. And you know, one of the touch points guiding principles is parents are the experts on their children. But the way you always worked was the community is the expert on their children. I'm going to turn to Dr. Brown now. I know you've got lots of burning questions for Jeff.
I do. Thank you both, and thank you. I'm going to call you Mr. Canada. I'm not going to call you by your first name. That's my upbringing. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I understand.
Do it. Okay.
But Ernestine, when we started working in the Harlem Children's Zone, people said to us, listen, when you work with us, you are family forever. It's not about when the funding runs out, you're family. So it's been Jeff and Josh for a while, but.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad to be part of the family, but in our families, there's still some traditions. You don't.
My wife, if she was here, she'd be shaking her head and saying amen to you.
Okay.
That's how she is.
Yes, it was just so heartfelt and so lovely. And I have, pages and pages of notes. So you have filled up my cup. And I know that you're going to fill up the cup of the audience. So I want to really just thank you for that. And it was heartfelt like in the beginning, because at 7 or 8 or 9, as you were telling your story, clearly you understood the concept of equity. You knew it from the beginning. Maybe you didn't use that word, but you knew that you deserved better, and that all children who look like you, who maybe don't look like us, but who are in similar situations, deserve to thrive. So I really appreciate that. And of course, I'm heartfelt about your experiences, that it had to be that way. But I'm so grateful that you're here because our experiences make us, who we are, and they feed us. And I have so many questions, and Josh, so lovely, like your first question, because I had circled around. So you mentioned, Mr. Canada, about rebuilding opportunities, like for children today. But we also know that babies and children, the youth of today, are not like yesteryear. They're coming out different. They're coming out ready. So I appreciate you saying, action and plan to do, and ensure that folks have a seat at the table. And it's not all gloom and doom. But when you think about today's youth, you think about today's babies, because they are different. They're ready. I mean, you have 1-month-olds who we would think before, like, they're holding their heads up and they're turning. Okay. So our charts have to be different. And then, but you also think about giving voice to children today who are entrepreneurs, who want different paths. So do you have some strategies there when we think about inviting them in earlier, respecting their voice, maybe even a second part of the question? Of course, college is so important, but there are many paths to success for our youth. How can we lift them both up without diminishing one?
Great. So thank you first for your comments, and also for your work in this, and I'm really impressed with your academic career. But once Josh said you were a doula, I said now I'm really feeling her, because that work is often a matter of life and death for and particularly women of color. So thank you for that. Just on this issue about agency with young people and how do you give them the voice? I believe that it's our responsibility to give our young people a range of opportunities to choose from. So if you come into one of our community spaces, you see we have a rock climbing wall. We got a zip line. Kids are learning tennis. Now look, doesn't matter. This is what's been with for my kids. They were in love with football for 3 months. And they want to do football anymore. Now they're going to do that. Then they don't want to do that. Great. Go out, experience these kind of things. To me, is the first obligation we have for our children. I want them not only to physically experience, I want them to travel. I want them to see places. I want them to feel like New York is part of their community, not just Harlem, that they can go anywhere. I want them to be able to go out to dinners in nice places and experience what that's like. So it's not uncomfortable for them when they're facing these things later on in life and they're not quite so socially isolated. So that's one thing. The other thing, though, that I think you mentioned that's important is I want them to have the ability to give voice to what they're feeling, experiencing, and the challenges they're facing and the ways they want to deal with that. So you'll find that we have some of the strongest arts programs, dance programs, spoken word programs, that when I say good, I mean high quality starting in at first and second grade, that our young people begin to experience more than just their academic development, because we think we're trying to build complete folks who are confident in who they are and what their place is in the world. And they need opportunities to demonstrate that. So these leadership opportunities that young people get, for a lot of folks, the only place that happened was in the church. When I was a kid, there were opportunities the adults gave you to demonstrate your. A lot of our kids are no longer involved in those institutions of faith. So we're saying, where can you find opportunities to develop these leadership skills? And they have to be intentional. So that is part of our work moving forward. So now your second question, I'm not quite so sure you're gonna think I'm such a nice guy when I answer your second question, which is about college. This is what I've said to folks, and I think you'll get this. We have expectations for our children. And I tell folks, I know a lot of powerful and wealthy folks, and they've only had one expectation for their children, and that's for them to go to college. I've never met any of them who had an expectation that they were gonna go join the military or gonna go become a plumber or gonna be a carpenter. I mean, everybody I knew, and let me tell you, to me, what that stood for. It stood for that my kids have the intellect to be able to compete on an academic level with the best in America. And my theory is, if that's good enough for rich people, for professionals, for upper middle class folks, that's good enough for my kids. All my kids, I want to grow, and we start them literally. If you come into our kindergarten, you'll see our kids stand up in the hallway and they have their creed. And their creed says, we will go to college, we will succeed. This is our promise, this is our creed. And I remember my youngest son, I think Josh knows, because Barry actually helped me with Jeff Jr. I have older kids who are in their late 40s and early 50s. But my youngest is only 24, about to be 25 next month. So he was born right when we started working with Touch Points, and my wife and I read the book and we did a bunch of stuff. He's a good kid, just finished, graduated NYU social work school. He's now a clinical social worker doing work for everybody. I'm proud of the kid. But he's a little kid, and maybe 9 or 10, and he's in the hallway. He sees all these kids lining up and saying their creed out loud. All the same, he says, "Daddy, you're brainwashing these kids." I said, "Yep, we are. That's exactly what we're doing. We're brainwashing all of them." But this is. I want to be 100%. All my kids don't end up going to college. About probably 93% end up, but all of them get in college. Every single one of those kids knows they've got a college acceptance, and it is their choice not to go. Not because they're not smart enough or they're not talented enough, because I decided I'm going to join the police force. Great, I have no problem with that, but you got your college acceptance, and you know you're not joining the police force because you can't do college level work. So that's why we have this standard. I'll tell you the other thing I worry about, Dr. Brown. The moment I go into my schools and I tell my teachers, you don't have to prepare all these kids for college. There's another track. You know what's going to happen. They're going to be like, "Thank God you said that," because I had no idea what I was going to do with Raheem. And now I'm with him on that other track because I know at 9, he's not college material. These aren't racist. These are not folks who are insensitive. We all believe that we can tell who's going to end up where by looking at their current behavior. And I have been wrong myself about this so many times where I've said, "Oh, that one there is not going to make it." And the only thing, I've been in the same place for like 37 years. I run into that kid, they're grown. They're like, "Hey, Mr. Canada, you remember me?" And I'm thinking, I sure do remember you. And they tell me a story. "Yeah, I messed up, but you always told me this about going to school. I went to," and I'm like, "Wow, you too, huh?" My teachers don't have an option. They gotta prepare everybody. That's including special ed, by the way. Everybody has to be prepared for college. Let the kid decide college is not for me, not my staff. That's my pushback on this issue about college. I'll tell you the other thing. You go 30 blocks from where I am on 125th Street. You go into one of those exclusive private schools, every kid's going to college. Every kid, no one pushes back on them. No one says to them, "Why do you have that standard for your kid?" It's not just going to college, but what elite colleges are you going to, right? That to me is where you have a divide in our country, where some kids, there's one set of expectations for, other kids just 20 blocks away, a whole different set of expectations. And I'm telling my team, no, we're going to treat all of these kids as if they're Einsteins. Even though we know many of them are struggling for lots of different reasons, we're going to get those folks prepared because I think that here's the other sad truth. The requirements to get into college in some schools are so lax. It is basically meaning you can basically write and read and do basic math. If we don't have kids who can get to that standard, we have failed those kids, whether they go to college or not. And so to me, being accepted to college just means you have those basic skills. And you can't be a plumber, and you can't be an electrician, and you can't be anything unless you have those basic skills. They're the same skills, different pathways, same skills. I think for my kids, I want them to know what the stock market is, what CEOs in America do, why there are options for them, and industries they've never thought about. Great, you want to be a basketball player, but that career might last you 10 years. But that person's been behind that camera for 25 years. And you need to think more broadly about the options for young people, because I think that's part of our message, which is there's something for everybody out there that can pay you a great wage and you can live a decent life as long as you get the prerequisite skill growing up. So I'm sorry, that was a filibuster. I didn't mean to go on and on about that.
No, I embrace that message fully. We are still family. So
Great.
I hear you. I embrace it. I'm elevating that message. So thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to Joshua.
Thank you. I think we are about out of time, and I'm so glad to get to be with you again today. I'm being reminded of all the things I've never forgotten that you taught me, and you've taught me so much more. And the strategic power of expectations, I think, has always been a part of how you set up this cradle to college pipeline. It's the power of expectations along with, I think, the power of imagination. As I listen to you, you are imagining the possibilities, and then you're setting expectations that we're going to make it happen. And one other thing, and just out of appreciation for all you've given me personally, our center, and our country and the world, the respect. There's the power of respect. And when you talk about, well, if we have 2 tracks, then I think one of the big challenges is holding on to the respect for every child and for their potential. And when you talk about the devastation of COVID, is in part people just being worn out and giving up and saying, I can't handle this anymore. And yet, we still have schools, we still have children, and what they're getting when we lose hope and lose imagination are children who are having experiences of not being respected. And I don't mean to place blame anywhere, but the other thing that I've seen you give so many parents and so many children is respect. In your Harlem Gems for 4-year-olds, they're going to learn English, French, and Spanish, every one of them at age 4. And it's a way of saying, we believe in your possibility because we have this respect for you and expectations. So I just can't thank you enough for who you are and how you are, and all you've given me personally, and all you've given to so many children and families, not just in Harlem, but all over the country. And I'm so glad. You may not be, your wife not, maybe your grandson may not be happy that you came out of retirement, but I am. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you so much, Dr. Brown. I just appreciate both of you for being partners in this struggle with it.
Thank you.
We're honored to be a part of it. So we will say goodbye to you, Jeffrey Canada. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
We are so grateful to Jeff for being with us and for everything Jeff has done and all he continues to do for Black and Brown children. And as he says, for all children living in poverty and all children everywhere. And we are so grateful to all of you for your work and for coming together so that together we can strengthen the work that we all do for all children. We hope you'll join us again for Learning to Listen Conversations for Change on October 26th with Dr. Melissa Walls. She's a Anishinaabe and a social scientist working with Indigenous communities on health equity research and culturally relevant public health programming. Dr. Walls will share with us Indigenous family strengths in the forms of benevolent childhood experiences, positive cultural identity, and other socio-cultural factors supporting Indigenous children's optimal development. And you can find out more at brazeltontouchpoints.org. This fall, we're launching 2 new free family-to-family conversation series, Somos Latinx Families. The next conversation is this Monday, October 3rd, and Parenting While Rising to Developmental Challenges. You can join that next conversation on October 24th. And as you saw in the chat, on October 11th, we are launching a free 3-part series on how to advocate for children and families just in time for the 2022 midterm elections. Again, go to brazeltontouchpoints.org for more information. 3 more exciting events this fall. The Strengths-Based Family Engagement Workshop series starts on October 12th. The Development is a Journey workshop comes back on October 20th, and so does the next Touchpoints training, The How of Child and Family Engagement. Again, you can find out more at braseltontouchpoints.org. Thank you for joining us today, and see you again soon.